They say humiliation is the cruelest teacher. It strips you down, bare and quiet, in front of people who matter just enough to make it hurt. But the ones who break you, they're always the ones you believed would protect you. It happened in late spring, outside Springfield, under a rented canopy dress to look like permanence. Carol wanted the reception to feel intimate. Her word. Linen tablecloths, borrowed centerpieces, champagne flutes like they meant something. We were celebrating a renewal of vows. A ceremony for the photos, a gathering for the stories. But stories have a way of turning on their authors. I remember the heat, that sticky kind of warmth that clings to your collar, follows you under your sleeves. And the murmurs. Family members who still hadn't quite figured out what I was to them. I was Michael. Just Michael. No title. No label. No role that anyone wanted to claim out loud. Carol floated through the crowd like she was born for it. The kind of woman who could balance a smile between cruelty and charm. I watched her laugh with her sister by the mimosa cart. I watched her avoid the men who joked too long and hug the women she hated the most. She was so good at pretending this life was beautiful. I was not. I kept to the edge of the patio with a sweating glass in my hand, watching as the warmth of other people's conversations circled around me, never touching me. That was always the arrangement, included but never invited. Present but never necessary. And then Lily arrived. 17 and dressed like she owned the day. Her father's bone structure, her mother's venom. She kissed Carol's cheek, ignored mine. I got a nod, the kind you give the janitor on your way into court. She'd been cold for years, but this day was different. There was something rehearsed in the way she moved through the crowd, like she'd been waiting for a stage. And I, like a fool, gave her one. They asked me to say a few words. A toast, they said. Something kind. Something strong. I cleared my throat and held the mic too gently. My hands still sweat when I think of it. I said her name, Carol, and looked at her like I meant it. I talked about second chances, about family not being born but built. About the years we'd stacked together like bricks, heavy and awkward, but lasting. I never finished the sentence, because Lily laughed, loud, sharp, perfectly timed. It cut through the backyard like a blade through silk. Conversations froze. Heads turned. I paused, holding the mic like it could protect me. And then she said it. He's so temporary. One word. One crack. But she wasn't done. Not on our level. But hey, good speech, right? The crowd shifted. A few polite chuckles. Nervous ones. Some laughed outright, old friends of her father's, I'd guess. The rest looked away. That was the worst part. No one stood up. No one stopped her. And then I turned to Carol. She didn't flinch. Didn't scold Lily. Didn't grab her wrist or mouth an apology. Just stood there with that practiced stillness. Calm as lake water before the storm breaks. She's just being honest, Carol said. No hesitation. No shame. No glance in my direction. She's just being honest. And in that moment, I understood what kind of man I'd been reduced to. Not a husband. Not a father. Not even a guest. Just a man who paid for the wine, who drove the truck to set up the tables, who held his breath when her friends mentioned her real family. Just a placeholder in a photograph that didn't need me. I looked around and saw it clearly. The way their eyes glazed over when I spoke. The way Carol's cousins made sure not to sit too close to me. How her brother shook my hand like he was humoring a stranger. I wasn't a member of this family. I was an appendage. Useful until I wasn't. I'd paid for the dress Carol wore that day. I remember holding the receipt in my hand for weeks before finally tossing it in the drawer with the rest. Dental bills, Lily's car insurance, prom night deposits, college brochures. My name was nowhere on her marriage certificate, nowhere in her heart. But it was on every invoice that kept this family from collapsing. I should have said something. I should have let the weight of it all land in that moment. Turned to Lily and told her what that dress cost, what the backyard cost, what the last 7 years of her education and orthodontics and gas cards cost. But I didn't, because that would have meant I cared. And the one thing you don't do when your dignity is bleeding out in front of strangers is let them see the wound. So I nodded. I nodded and passed the mic back like nothing had happened. I folded my hands and smiled like a coward. And when Carol touched my arm briefly, not to comfort, but to move me aside for the photographer, I understood something permanent. She didn't defend me because she didn't see an attack. She didn't flinch because she agreed. She didn't lie because I wasn't worth lying for. She's just being honest. God, I hear it in my sleep now. The next hour bled past like a funeral I hadn't been told I was attending. Guests toasted. The music played. Lily twirled her wine like a weapon and smiled when she caught me looking. She knew what she'd done. She knew who she was in that moment. The princess of a castle built on my back. I stayed through dinner. That's the part that still shames me. I sat there, napkin in lap, sipping wine I had paid for, chewing through steak I had grilled, pretending I still belonged. I even laughed when one of Carol's friends made a joke about stepdads always being the patient ones. The kind of joke that expects you to nod along while it crushes your spine. I nodded. What else could I do? Scream? Throw my glass? Flip the table and remind them that the only reason this backyard was lit up and beautiful was because of the second mortgage I took out 2 years ago? No, that would have made me petty. That would have proven their point. So I waited. Let the night unfold like a play I had no part in. When Lily gave her own toast, short, sarcastic, careful to include her real father in every sentence, I didn't even blink. She didn't mention me. Not once. Not by name. Not by title. It was her way of erasing me without moving a single stone. When the music started and the lights dimmed, I walked the perimeter of the party like a ghost. I watched Carol dance with her cousin. I watched Lily pose for photos, arm draped around a boy who wasn't family but was treated like more than I'd ever been. And when it was finally dark enough, I walked back to the parking lot, unhooked my tie, and stood by my truck. Just stood there, breathing. The air was cooler now, sharper. It felt like something had broken loose in my chest. Some last wire holding it all together. I didn't cry. Not there. Not then. But I remember thinking, this is it. This is the moment I leave the stage. Not with a bang. Not with some heroic monologue. Just with silence. Because when a man has nothing left to defend, he either starts fighting everyone, or he walks away. And I was done fighting ghosts. I didn't say goodbye. Not to Carol. Not to Lily. Not to the people who clinked their glasses and passed me without a glance. Their laughter echoing behind me like a song I was never invited to learn. I slid behind the wheel of my truck and sat there for a long while, hands on the steering wheel, the engine off. The reception lights flickered behind the trees like a haunted memory. Music still played, muffled by the walls of my truck. I could picture it clearly. Lily twirling under string lights, Carol sipping from her glass, the tables littered with crumbs and compliments. No one noticed I was gone. To them, it probably looked like weakness. To me, it was closure. I didn't drive straight home. I took the long road. Past the gas station I used to fill her tank without being asked. Past the school where I'd stood in the rain for Lily's theater rehearsals. Past the hardware store where I'd spent thousands fixing a house I didn't own. For a family that wouldn't say my name out loud unless they were asking for something. I pulled into the lot of my small apartment, the one I kept furnished like a secret. Carol had called it a man cave when I signed the lease a year ago. A safety net, I told her. In truth, it was something I'd built just for me. Something untouched by her daughter's mood swings or her family's expectations. A place that smelled like wood and dust and my own stubborn dignity. The walls were bare. No photos. No echoes of the life I tried to build with them. Just a couch, a lamp, a desk, and a mattress on the floor. It had always felt too quiet. Until now. Now it felt earned. I sat down at the desk, turned on the lamp, and stared at the keyboard. And then I began the reset. First, Lily's tuition. I opened the portal to the university billing system. The login still autofilled. I had been covering her tuition for nearly 3 years, without hesitation, without thanks. Carol's ex-husband sent money when he remembered. But even when he didn't, classes were paid. Because I had been the safety net. The invisible lifeline. Not anymore. I canceled the scheduled payments. A warning popped up on the screen. Your student may lose access to enrollment or campus services. I clicked, confirm. Good. Next, the car. The leased SUV in Lily's name, technically mine, legally speaking. Her birthday gift 2 years ago. Carol had cried when I handed her the keys in the driveway. Lily had barely looked up from her phone. I remember standing there, waiting for something more. A thank you, a smile, anything. It never came. I logged into the dealership's lease portal, found the return request, and scheduled a pickup. Reason for return. I typed no longer authorized driver. Then I froze her gas card. That one hurt. Not because of the money, but because of the memory of all those late-night drives. Her calling Carol in a panic, saying she was stranded or lost or scared. And me, always me, climbing out of bed to go find her. Now she'd have to find her way without me. Then came the bank transfers. Allowance. Rent. Textbook reimbursements. Gone. I opened a spreadsheet I'd kept out of sight. Every dollar. Every line item. I documented it all. Not out of bitterness, but because I needed proof that I had mattered. That I had given. That I had carried more than they knew. The total sat at the bottom like a gravestone. $186,420. 14. Over 6 years. That's what I'd poured into that household. After taxes, after health insurance, after I stopped buying anything for myself that wasn't strictly necessary. And they called me temporary. They called me not on their level. At 2:17 a.m. I shut the laptop. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't racing. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel sorrow. I felt clean. I made a pot of coffee and stood at the window, watching the empty street. The silence wrapped around me like a second skin. I had been so used to Lily's stomping upstairs, to Carol's sighs behind closed doors, to the constant sound of their needs swallowing mine. But here it was just me. No noise. No begging. No performance. Freedom doesn't arrive with fanfare. Comes in small, sharp moments. A screen confirming cancellation. A silence that no longer feels like exile. A breath that doesn't hitch in your chest. They would find out soon. Maybe in the morning. Maybe not until Monday. The systems would trigger denied cards, bounced tuition, a car being towed from its parking spot. And then the phones would light up. They'd call me first. They always did when things broke. Because I was the one who fixed. Because I had always made the chaos feel manageable. Because I had trained them unknowingly to depend on me without gratitude. But this time there would be no answer. No reply. Just the cold hum of a number they still had, but that no longer served them. I poured myself a second cup. Black. No sugar. And I sat in the quiet, the clock ticking overhead like it had a right to my time. I thought about the first day I met Lily. She was 13, wearing headphones, pretending not to hear Carol introduce me. Her eyes had the same calculation then, the same quiet appraisal of value. I remember offering her a joke, something harmless. She rolled her eyes, said, "My real dad tells better ones." That should have been the warning, the first crack. But I smiled, like a fool. I told myself she's just a kid. She'll grow. She'll see who stays. She never did. Or maybe she saw exactly that, and it only made her resent me more. Children don't always want replacements. Sometimes they just want an audience. And I had been a willing spectator to their performance for years. But I wasn't clapping anymore. I looked down at my hands, calloused, scarred in places, built from years of work. I had hammered their shelves, patched their drywall, fixed their roof after a storm ripped the shingles clean. I had bled into that house. Literally once when the kitchen pipe burst and the wrench slipped. And what did I get? "She's just being honest." That sentence lived in my spine now, played behind my eyes like a film I couldn't turn off. Carol's voice smooth, detached, like I was an employee, like I was a contractor finishing his last job before disappearing quietly into the night. Maybe that's all I ever was. Not a partner, not a father figure, not a man worth defending. Just a man who happened to be nearby when things needed fixing. By 3 a.m., I opened the safe in the closet, took out the documents I'd filed away, insurance forms, estate plans, emergency contacts, Carol's name was on everything. Mine would be on nothing by morning. I made the calls: bank, benefits, employer. Removed her as beneficiary. No notice. No explanation. Let her find out the way I had, publicly. Abruptly. Without comfort. I stared at the line on the page. In case of death. Notify. Blank. I left it empty, because I didn't know who to list anymore. The family I'd built? Or the one I'd never had? To 4 a.m. I took out the trash. The bag was heavier than usual. Full of paperwork, receipts, fragments of a life I was erasing piece by piece. I dropped it in the bin with a thud that echoed louder than it should have. Then I stood there, under the flickering porch light, breathing in the weight of a decision finally made. No speeches, no drama, just the quiet dismantling of a role I'd never been paid for, never been thanked for. They would call it cruel. They always do, when the man who carried the burden finally sets it down. But I knew the truth. This wasn't revenge. It was release. It started at 7:41 a.m. That's when my phone lit up. Lily Carter. All caps, like a scream already loaded. I let it ring. I watched the screen until it went dark again. 60 seconds later, it rang again. And again. And again. By the fourth call, I switched it off. I didn't need to hear the voice. I already knew the pitch. I already knew the rhythm. Panic laced with entitlement. Accusation stitched into every breath. A child flailing only because the hand she'd always slapped away was no longer there to catch her. Then came the texts. A waterfall of them. Each one angrier than the last. What did you do? I'm dropped? You can't just stop paying for college. This is actual abuse. I'm telling Mom. I read them all in silence. Not because I was angry. Not anymore. But because I wanted to remember them, every line, every insult that stripped the last thread of illusion from what we had. These weren't the words of a daughter in shock. These were the words of a tenant whose utilities had been cut. No gratitude. No reflection. Just demand. I brewed coffee and didn't reply. The phone stayed silent for 20 minutes. Then another name flashed on screen. Carol. I watched it ring out too. Not because I didn't want to speak to her, but because I already had. She just didn't hear it. She's just being honest. That was the conversation. That was the truth. Everything after that would be excuses dressed in grief. The doorbell rang at 9:02. I didn't answer. Let them feel the silence. At 11:30 it rang again. This time she waited. She knew I was inside. Carol always did have a sixth sense when it came to my quiet. Michael, she called through the door. We need to talk. I opened it. Not out of mercy. Out of curiosity. She looked exactly like I knew she would. Polished, practiced, ready to sell sincerity like it was currency. She held her phone in one hand, her jaw tight, her brows already forming the soft arch of disbelief. Lily's been calling you, she said. I know. She said the tuition's gone. Her campus account was locked this morning. I know. Carol stared at me, expecting more. A sigh, an apology, an explanation. I gave her none. You did this? She asked, as if she needed to hear it aloud. I nodded once. Last night. She stepped inside like she still lived there, like she still had a right to the air between these walls. Her perfume followed, sweet and acidic, and for a moment it reminded me of late nights and small forgivenesses. But now it smelled like betrayal. You can't just, Michael, you can't just pull the rug out like that. She's got finals. She's got a life. You don't understand what you've. I do, I said, cutting her off. I understand exactly what I've done. I stopped financing someone who called me disposable. Carol flinched just barely. She was emotional. She was honest. I saw it in her eyes then, the flicker of guilt she couldn't quite bury. It surfaced for a moment, then disappeared behind years of practiced rationalizations. She's a kid, Michael. No, I said. She's a legal adult. College student. Old enough to mock me in front of a crowd. Old enough to understand what consequences feel like. She didn't mean it. Neither did you. That's what made it worse. She sank onto the arm of the couch, suddenly looking smaller than I'd seen her in years. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said quietly. But you did. She didn't argue. She just sat there, staring at her hands. She's in shock, she said eventually. She doesn't know how to process what happened. You were the stable one, the provider. She counted on that. I almost laughed. The irony burned. She counted on me, I said, but never once respected me. Not in private. Not in public. Not when I paid her tuition. And not when she spat on my presence like I was some tragic footnote in your story. Carol didn't look up. She was screaming this morning, she whispered. Said she got an email from the university saying her account had been flagged for non-payment. Her meal plan was canceled. She's locked out of her portal. She's calling it sabotage. She can call it whatever she wants, I said. I call it balance. Carol finally looked up, something sharp in her eyes. You think this is justice? No, I said. It's clarity. She stood. The softness drained from her. So that's it? She asked. You just cut her off? After everything you did, now you want credit by destroying everything? I don't want credit, I said calmly. I want distance. From the people who used me and the woman who watched them do it. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. So I kept going. For years, I paid for a life I wasn't allowed to belong to. You smiled through it. You let her reject me in stages. A silent protest of every kindness I offered. And when she finally carved me open in front of your friends, you handed her the knife. I didn't. You said she was being honest. Carol's face fell. I stepped closer, not threatening, but steady. And now I'm being honest. I'm done. With her. With you. With this performance. She didn't cry. That surprised me. Carol never liked to break in front of others. She was the type to collect herself before the tears came. The type to turn pain into strategy. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She needs help, Michael. You can hate me, but don't ruin her future just to prove a point. She ruined it, I said. I just stopped pretending she didn't. Carol stared at me. She's calling her biological father. Good. You know he won't come through. I'm counting on it. She turned to leave, and then paused in the doorway. She still thinks of you as family, she said, soft, almost convincing. I shook my head. No, I said. She thinks of me as an ATM with a quiet face, and you helped her build that story. Carol's voice cracked. You're punishing her for being young. No, I said again. I'm holding her accountable for being cruel. She left without slamming the door, and I stood there, in the quiet, waiting. By noon, the phone lit up again. Lily, then Carol. Then a number I didn't recognize. I picked up. It was the university's financial services office. A woman named Brenda. She was polite, almost apologetic, as she explained that Lily Carter's tuition plan had been voided due to the primary sponsor withdrawing authorization. Is there any intention to reinstate the payment plan? She asked. No, I said. Would you like to provide an alternate sponsor? No. There was a pause. I understand, she said gently. She didn't. But that was fine. By 3 o'clock, Lily called again. Voicemails this time. I don't know what you're doing, she spat into the phone. But this is disgusting. I'm literally about to lose my place at the university. I'm calling legal aid. You don't get to do this. She paused. Mom says you're punishing me for one comment. One. After everything you did for me, now you just destroy my life because I embarrassed you. I closed the voicemail before she finished. That night, Carol showed up again. She didn't come inside. She stood at the bottom of the apartment stairs and called up, her voice cold. She's staying with me, for now. But she's devastated. I didn't reply. She's begging for a second chance, Carol said. I stepped out onto the landing, looked her in the eyes, and said the only truth I had left. She had 17 years to offer a first one. Then I went back inside, locked the door, and turned off the phone. I didn't go back. Not the next day. Not the next week. Not for the holidays or the birthdays or the quiet evenings that used to feel like obligation wrapped in ritual. I had made my decision. Not with fire. Not with fury. Just a quiet extraction from a life that only valued me in shadow. A disappearance in plain sight. At first, they didn't believe it would last. I could feel it in the messages I deleted without opening, in Carol's half-voicemails that cut off mid-sigh, in the unknown numbers that began to call at the same time each evening, like clockwork with a ticking conscience. They thought I was bluffing. They thought I was waiting for attention. They didn't understand what had really changed. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't punishment. It was release. The moment I closed the door on Carol and Lily, I stepped out of something far worse than conflict. I stepped out of a system where love had terms, where respect had to be earned but support was expected, where I was always the first to give and the last to be seen. I started waking up early again, not for work, for myself, for silence. I'd walk to the corner diner where no one knew my name, drink burnt coffee in a booth by the window, and feel the luxury of being unnecessary. It's strange what you notice once your usefulness has been amputated. Nobody calls to ask if you're picking up milk. Nobody asks if you've seen the electric bill. Nobody needs a signature, a ride, a loan, a last-minute favor. The silence at first was terrifying, and then it was sacred. In that silence, I found myself again. Not the man Carol had shaped with her soft expectations, not the wallet Lily had learned to read like a credit line, but the man I had been before all of it. Before blended family meetings and ungrateful daughters and the creeping sense that I was only as valuable as my willingness to remain quiet. I remember standing in the apartment kitchen holding a chipped mug and laughing, really laughing, not because something was funny, but because it had taken me so long to recognize the freedom of being alone. No more pretending, no more smiling while being erased, no more hoping they'd see the sacrifices and finally say thank you. Carol tried once more 2 weeks later. She came alone. I knew because I watched her pull into the lot from the second-floor window, watched her sit in her car for a full 10 minutes before she gathered the courage to knock. I didn't answer right away. I made her wait. She didn't deserve the courtesy of immediacy. When I opened the door, she had that look again, the one she wore during arguments she planned to lose gracefully. "I'm not here to fight," she said. "I'm not here to listen." She stepped back. "Please." So I let her in. She looked around like she was entering a crime scene, seeing the life I had without her, the space that bore no trace of Lily, no photo frames, no keepsakes, just me, the man she'd married, stripped of the performance. "I miss you," she said. I didn't answer. She took a seat, folded her hands. "She's different now, quieter. I think it scared her." "Good." Carol winced. "Michael, she's still young. She's old enough to wound. She regrets what she said." "No, she regrets what it cost her." Carol looked down. I sat across from her, slow, deliberate. I wanted her to feel the weight of the space between us, the canyon she had helped dig. "I spent years trying to earn my place," I said, "thinking if I just worked harder, gave more, kept quiet, they'd let me in. I thought presence was enough. Turns out it was just expected." "She knows now," Carol said softly. I shook my head. "She doesn't. She just misses the convenience of me, the safety, the payments." "That's not fair." "No," I said. "It's accurate." Carol's voice wavered. "She cried the other night, said she never thought you'd actually leave, that you'd always be there no matter what." "That's not love," I said. "That's certainty, and certainty breeds contempt." She didn't argue. She couldn't, because she had taught Lily that I would always stay, that I could be mocked and dismissed and still show up the next morning with breakfast and a signed check. She had built that version of me, and I had played the part too well. "I made mistakes," she whispered. "You allowed them." Carol stood, wiped at her eyes. "I'm not asking you to come back. I just wanted you to know. It's not the same without you." I looked at her, really looked, and in that moment, I didn't see my wife. I saw a woman who had chosen comfort over confrontation. A mother who had protected her daughter's pride more than her husband's dignity. A partner who watched me drown in sacrifice and called it love. "I'm glad it's not the same," I said. "It shouldn't be." She nodded once, as if she'd expected that answer. Then she left. I didn't watch her go. I didn't stand at the window. I didn't wonder if she'd turn around, because I didn't need her to. That night, Lily called. I let it ring out. She didn't leave a message. She called again. No voicemail. Just silence broken by persistence. And then, finally, she sent a text. "I was wrong. I didn't mean it. Please, just talk to me." I stared at the words. For a long time, I thought that moment would break me. That it would feel like vindication, or redemption, or some bittersweet confirmation that my sacrifices had finally been seen. But I didn't feel any of that. I felt pity. And then I felt nothing. Because the apology came only after the benefits were gone. Because silence is not repentance. Because I knew deep down if I restored her access, if I paid just once more, the cycle would reset. And I would go back to being a man who financed his own erasure. So I didn't reply. Instead, I sat on the balcony, watched the streetlights flicker, and let the night be quiet. A few days later, I heard from a friend in town that Lily was working part-time now. That she'd deferred the semester. That she was figuring things out. Good. Let her. Let her feel what it means to be abandoned, not in anger, but in resolve. Let her learn that people are not bottomless wells. Let her stand in a world that no longer rearranges itself to protect her from her own arrogance. Carol didn't call again. Not for weeks. And when she finally did, she didn't mention Lily. She just said, "I hope you're doing okay." I texted back, 2 words. "I am." And it was true. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying anyone. I wasn't bracing for the next eye roll, the next insult, the next passive-aggressive jab disguised as a joke. I wasn't bleeding from 1,000 cuts only to be told I was too sensitive. I was alone, but I was whole. They say absence makes the heart grow fonder. Maybe, but sometimes it makes the heart grow honest. I don't know if Lily ever really understood what she lost. I don't know if Carol cried herself to sleep. I don't know if their world fell apart in small, silent ways without me. I didn't ask. I didn't need to, because the truth isn't always something you hear. Sometimes the truth is what never comes again. No knock at the door. No apology worth its weight. No second chance. And maybe that's the only way some lessons take root. So now I ask you, whoever you are, wherever you sit, if you had stood in my shoes, would you have stayed? Would you have kept giving, kept showing up, kept swallowing your pride just to hold a seat at a table where your name was never written? Or would you have finally stood, stepped back, and walked out? Not in rage, not in bitterness, but in clarity? Tell me, what would you have done?